Mark Schlabach, hopefully you're having a great afternoon. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hey, good. Just never too early to talk college football in Tuscaloosa. And the last time you released one of these top 25 was the day after Alabama had captured a national title over in Atlanta.
Yeah, we've had a couple. I think we had one national championship, one post-declaration, and they wanted to come back with one after signing day, which was a little bit different this year given the early signing period. But there's been a lot of stuff going on the last couple of weeks, so it was good.
I certainly want to pick your brain. Let me ask you, going back to this job that Nick Saban did here in Tuscaloosa, do you think this is Nick Saban's best coaching job?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at who was on the field at the end of that game, from Jerry Jeudy to Leatherwood to Najee Harris to the kid who caught the game-winning touchdown, Devontae Smith. I mean, there's a lot. 4 or 5 freshmen. I did not think it was his best defense. I think, given the losses they had because of injuries at the linebacker position and not having an elite pass rusher up front, the fact that it was a first-year offensive coordinator, I think definitely one of his better coaching jobs.
Is Georgia going to become a team that we see frequently in this college football playoff conversation? Is this just an appetizer for those dog fans over in your state to get ready to be a part of the college football playoff conversation?
I think so. I mean, I think you never know what's going to happen, and it's hard to predict how kids are going to react. But, I think with the way Kirby Smart and his staff have recruited, I think talent-wise, Georgia's closing the gap on Alabama. I think he and his staff proved this past season that they can certainly coach, inserting a true freshman quarterback in Jake Fromm. And I don't think they were still very talented up front on offense. I think they had some holes in the secondary that we saw Bama expose. So I think if you get better on the offensive line and the defensive line and get some better athletes on the back end of that defense, I think Georgia has a chance. And I still think the East has got a long way to go to catch up to the West. So I think he can probably take advantage of that the next couple of years.
How quick can Dan Mullen somewhat, and I say close the gap, he's not going to get there just overnight, but can he close the gap in 2018 a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, they can't be any worse at quarterback. I think that's one of the things Dan can fix right away is just get more consistent quarterback play, whether it's Felipe Franks or Castle or somebody else coming in there. But I think there's no question talent level has slipped the last couple of years. Jim McElwain was not known as an elite recruiter. I think there's going to be a couple of more years where Mullen has to rebuild it a little bit, but they've got good talent on defense. I just think they got to get back to having the skill players that we've been accustomed to Florida having.
Mark, let's make our way back to Alabama here for a couple of minutes. You've got them at number 2. You've got Clemson at number 1. What keeps Alabama out of that number 1 spot?
I mean, it's a coin flip at this point.
Okay.
Bama lost some key guys, Ridley and Bozeman, their center, and Rashaan Evans and Minka Fitzpatrick and Harrison and Tony Brown. A lot of guys gone in the secondary. I went with Clemson just based on the fact that Austin Bryant, Cleveland Farrell, and Christian Wilkins came back. Need to see a little bit more out of Kelly Bryant before I'm convinced that he's an elite quarterback. Does Trevor Lawrence step in there this spring and take the job from him? I've been told by coaches who've recruited the state of Georgia for a long, long time that he's about as close to Deshaun Watson as you're going to find. And we'll see if he can do what Watson did at Clemson. But, I mean, Clemson's right there. I mean, we already talked about the freshman who played last year. I would assume Tua's the guy going into the spring. He'll have to hold off Jalen Hurts. But, Nick had a lot of turnover on his coaching staff. The defensive coordinator for the third time in as many years, another new offensive coordinator. So I think there's some continuity issues, but, he does it better than anybody.
And if you're predicting, we're just asking for your opinion. We're talking to Mark Schlabach, ESPN.com. If Tua is able to, as you said, hold on to that job and hold off Jalen Hurts, what happens to Jalen Hurts in your opinion?
I would assume the kid wants to remain a quarterback, so I would think certainly transferring would be an option. Does he stick around until he's a grad transfer and go try to play as a senior somewhere else? The fact that he played as a true freshman, gives him a chance to go out and sit out a year and not lose a year of eligibility. So he has some options. I mean, he'd make a great tailback. He's probably athletic enough to play in the secondary, slot receiver, or somewhere else. But most of the time, when those kids have played quarterback their entire careers, that's what they want to do.
You've got the key losses, and I invite people to go to ESPN.com. Mark Schlabach right now. We're talking about the way too early top 25. It's the second release. It's post-National Signing Day. And you point out that Nick Saban is rebuilding not only on the field but also off the field with all these coaching staff. I mean, how much risk do you think is being taken here with all these new coaches? And it's not like headliner names. Josh Gaddis is there, but there's guys that, like today, your colleague, Adam Rittenberg, who put out a name by the name of Kevin Peoples, Tulane defensive line coaches in the mix for Alabama's defensive line vacancy. Well, you have to go, who? And you have to go and Google him. You have to go look him up. He's not just it's a name that, you don't hear a lot about. You got to go find out more about him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people didn't know about Pete Golding or Carl Scott.
Sure.
People that really follow the sport probably knew about Josh Gaddis just because Penn State's receivers have been so good the last couple of years. But, the biggest key to me, and I think we saw a little bit of it on National Signing Day, is that Saban has lost his top recruiters. I mean, Jeremy Pruitt left, Kirby Smart left, Lane Kiffin left. So, he had to get some younger guys in there, I think, that can establish themselves as elite recruiters to go along with Tosh Lapoy. And Loxley's always had a great reputation as a recruiter. So I think that's one of the main things. But, I think they just need a little bit more stability. You just, even a program like Alabama that's been so good under Saban for so long, you just can't keep losing coordinators every year. But when you're good, that's what people want to do. They want to come hire your people. So I think, I don't think the turnover in the coaching staff, I don't think you can talk about it too much because I think it is a factor.
When you look at Georgia and Alabama, we've already talked about those two teams. Who is that next set of teams, or maybe just identify one team that you think can challenge for a conference title?
I think Alabama and Georgia right now are head and shoulders above the rest. I guess it would be Auburn, and I say that with a little bit of hesitation just because they lost Keon Johnson, who I thought when he was healthy was the best back in the league. They lost Petway, who was in there when he was hurt. Stidham's back, and he had a great year last year. Defensively, they have almost everybody coming back, but Jeff Holland and a couple of guys in the secondary. But, could have easily been Auburn in the playoff last year. They beat Georgia in the SEC championship game and weren't as banged up as they were. Maybe we're sitting here talking about Auburn as the team that has arrived. But, they opened the season against Washington in that Chick-fil-A game in Atlanta. I think they play road games at Georgia and Bama, so the schedule's a little bit more difficult. But, we'll have to see if Gus can find some horses in the backfield and get it going again.
Mark, where do you see Texas A&M going with Jimbo Fisher?
I think Jimbo is very, very good at what he does. I would like to have seen him finished with a little bit more effort at Florida State than what he did. I thought his kids quit. To be honest, I thought the coaching staff quit as well at the end. It just seemed like when DeAndre Francois went down against Alabama, they really didn't have another answer. You put together a good coaching staff. A&M is going to spend money. There's no question about that. They're going to give him everything he needs to be successful. He's going to face some obstacles, and that Tom Herman has turned Texas in the right direction, at least in terms of recruiting, and really dominated the state this year. I think some of that had something to do with the fact that A&M had a coaching change and was going through a transition. But Herman is one of the best recruiters out there, so I think he's going to face an uphill battle there. But they should be better than third or fourth or fifth in the West every year. They should be competing with Alabama and Auburn for the SEC West title each and every year because of where they're located, the amount of money being spent on the program. It's the richest athletic department in the country, so they should be competing for championships.
Mark, you've been writing for college football for a long time. ESPN, you have documented college football's success with many, 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 many books. What is the number one issue facing college football as we currently approach this offseason aggressively? What is that number one issue that you think college football needs to address?
I still think, and Saban has said this to me 3 or 4 times over the last 5 years, that, I just think that gap between the haves and the have-nots is just getting so wide, and it continues to just get wider, that I think in the next 5 to 10 years, the powers that be are really going to have to sit down and decide whether the South Alabamas and the Georgia States and the Georgia Southerns and the Louisiana Monroes should be competing at the same level as the Alabamas, the Michigans, the Georgias, and the Texases. I just think that there's a smart way to do it, to where these smaller group of 5 teams, shouldn't be spending the amount of money they're spending to try to compete with the traditional blue bloods and the powers from the Power 5 leagues. I think that's going to be the next round of conference realignment and maybe even some contraction that we see. And look, there's some programs in the group of 5s, like a Boise State or maybe even a UCF, that should be competing with the big boys, and there's probably some teams in the Power 5s that shouldn't. So I think that's something they're going to have to look at.
What do you think is the answer? I mean, do we create a separate division for them? Is there a separation between the top tier and the lower tier? What is the solution to kind of fixing some of this?
I mean, I think there can be 3 distinct divisions at the top between the Power 5s, the Group of 5,